Good morning, good people of a great nation. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the discussion segment of Development Focus with Didi Ojo on ITV. This fateful Wednesday, the 9th of June 2021. We are just a few days to the Democracy Day celebration of 2021. We just hope that we will have a very fun-filled and happy celebration on Saturday. Today we'll be talking of the panacea to overcoming Nigeria's lingering security and governance challenges. Everything surrounds governance. Here on this show, we look for solutions. We cannot pretend that there are no problems in Nigeria. There are myriads of problems, plethora of problems, but what are the solutions? So I've brought a professor of governance, if I can put it that way, Dr. Ayokunle Fagbemi, to join us on this edition of the program. Doc, you're welcome on the show.
Thank you very much, Jide, for having me.
It's a pleasure, it's an honor, it's a great privilege to have you join us on this show. Tell us about yourself, a bit of a background of whom you are.
Ayokunle Fagbemi incidentally read political science by default, ended up doing international relations, national security and defense management, and is a peace-building practitioner. Has had the privilege of working in government in public service, was involved in the social re-engineering of the Nigerian state, particularly under the Ibrahim Babangida administration, where we were involved in the MAMSA, handling socio-political re-engineering in terms of political education, civic education, research monitoring, and ensuring that we maintain the feedback. Part of what I did before I left service in 95 was to handle what used to be called the national mood reporting, wherein you receive data from all the 774 local governments, actually from all the 8,000 plus close to 9,000 wards, sifted through the local governments and then to the national headquarters. And we were reporting that every week, making sure that we gave the country an opportunity for the ruling elite then, even though they were a military junta, that they could receive a true reflection of what was going on at the grassroots, undiluted. And painfully for someone like me now, it's painful that the National Orientation Agency, where I used to be embedded and where I was working, unfortunately, instead of being able to do such a report every week like I used to handle it, can only do 2 reports in a month. That is a diminishing challenge that some of us face, because if the government cannot receive a feedback of what is happening that is truly reflective of the reality undiluted, then the approach of governance as a receptive, transparent, willing to engage the citizenry in constructive engagement and to ensure that governance services, delivery, policies, programs truly and genuinely meet the aspirations of the people will not be possible. So if we're having some challenges, we need to rethink and we need to reappraise some of our services delivery in this regard. So basically, Ayokunle Fagbemi ended up leaving public service and then came into the development sector, and been a peace-building practitioner. I've been privileged to serve on an organ of the African Union for 3.5 years, 2005 through 2008, consulting for ECOWAS, providing the technical expertise for national early warning mechanisms to be set up in ECOWAS member states. And in terms of direct governance, I've been involved in ensuring that the political party manifestos of the SDP NRC were crafted, because as a research person in government those days we were involved, and then ultimately participated in terms of monitoring of electoral processes as a statutory official of government. And when I eventually graduated and moved to the civil society, was now observing, even though occasionally, because of the previous experiences, they wanted us to be able to do the monitoring and not just observing, because there's a difference between monitoring and observing. And I've been privileged to do all this on the continent of Africa in the 5 regional economic communities, that is the SADC, ECOWAS. I've been involved at the IGAD level and things like that. And as a member of the AU ECOSOC, I was on the Peace and Security Cluster. I provided interface and opportunities to provide services for the Peace and Security Council. I was involved in the development of what is called the Livingstone Formula for the actualization of Article 20 of the Peace and Security Council protocol, which in a nutshell allows civil society to truly engage with state actors and to ensure that not only will we be engaging in terms of the early warning, but in terms of proactive response planning and development of the communities where you have some of these issues. Basically, in a nutshell, I think I've said a bit more than I should.
No. It's all right. The viewers at home wants to know who we brought on the program. That's why I always give few minutes to my guests to introduce themselves, even if I have personal relationship with them, because I want them to say as they want the public to know about them. And I'm very glad that you've told us about your experience in both the private and the public sector, the development sector, and at the level of the development consultancy that you have done. So let's come back home. Nigeria, we are celebrating 22 years of uninterrupted civil rule or democratic rule. I don't know where you stand. Some will say we are still transiting to democratic rule. We have civil rule. What is your take about if you are to look at this Fourth Republic, 1999 to 2021? What is your panoramic view of the governance situation in Nigeria?
The most important thing that we need to understand is this, that God has been very faithful. The citizens of the Nigerian states have been very trusting and ensuring that truly we want democracy to work and we want to participate in the determining and the determination of who ends up ruling us. Even though political actors are more concerned about state capture, the citizens are interested in participatory democracy. The political actors try to be involved in state capture. I'm being very careful, and that is why many would always want to have the discourse to amplify their position on whether we are truly operating a democracy or we are just having a civil rule. When you look at the episodic issue of you having elections every 4 years as provided for in the 1999 Constitution that we are operating, as defective as it may appear, and it is, you will realize that one thing that is very constant is the participation of the citizenry in the determining and determination of who eventually rules. Meanwhile, the political actors are more involved in the dynamics of state capture. And that is why you will discover that political actor A, who started with a particular party at the commencement in 1999, will suddenly gravitate towards another political party without seeming change of ideology and without seeming appreciation of going to consult the citizens in his constituency, the electorate in his constituency. And you'll see that the movement from the political parties are so dramatic and very instructive. I recall that one Chief Obulafo, interestingly, was brought into the government of the PDP led by Obasanjo in 1999, and it was just to fulfill the righteousness of having somebody coming in from APP. But interestingly, before you could say Jack, he had moved from being a member of APP and became a member of PDP to the extent that he rose to become the chairman of PDP. And that means that he is only interested, like every other political actor, in just being available to capture the states and say they are administering. And
But let me pause you here. I happen to have served, done my national youth service in Delta State. During my period, we have two categories of core members. Those who end up doing their primary assignment in Saudi Arabia, and those who end up doing their service in Siberia. And these are metaphors of, whether you get choice posting or you get just managed posting. So now, who are the people in Saudi Arabia? If you happen to be posted to Sapele, Wari, Ogbaro, Ugeli, and the oil-producing axis, you are lucky to be in Saudi Arabia. If you happen to be in Asaba, Ugwashuku, Ibuzo, Agbo, and the rest, you are in Siberia. So, likewise in politics, it is said that, people, the only thing that is permanent in politics is interest and not permanent friendship or enmity. So, in giving that allegory, what's your take? Is there anything wrong in people cross-carpeting or defecting from one party to the other?
Membership of a political party ideally should be based on principles. That you have some set of ideas and ideals that you hold there that will translate into how you are going to engage the system to provide governance services delivery that will lead to development and will benefit the citizenry of the jurisdiction that you are operating within. Unfortunately, political actors in our climate, particularly from 1999 till date, are more concerned with what they are going to benefit and not the legacies that they are going to leave behind. We cannot compare the political actors of this republic with the political actors of the First Republic.
Or second.
Or even the second that we are feeling are bad. When you take a look at the corruption index and indicators, when you look at the public service indicators of those two republics, you'll discover that, for crying out loud, those people will pass for saints now. And that those people that were summarily sentenced to 100 years, 200 years imprisonment on the guise that they were corrupt, today, if we were to use the same parameters, maybe what we should just do is bury some of these political actors alive. So that said, what are we expecting to achieve? We're expecting to achieve that citizens no longer should be waiting for the episodic period of electioneering, wherein even the political actors manipulate the processes and systems in such a way that it will benefit them in one way or the other. Yes, we have been able to put some frameworks, legal and policy, and the restraining citizens' participation and engagement to forestall some of their nuances of malfeasance that usually are called electoral malpractice. We have been able to put some few things in place. Citizens must now move to the level of constructive engagement beyond the electioneering era when you have just elections. We must now begin to say, if you are a legislator you have a constituency, you must always come back and give us briefing. And we will not entertain this idea of you just coming to give handouts or coming to distribute motorbikes or coming to distribute grinding machines. What we need is for you to engage us properly and bring the development to the community. You need to make sure that when we say this is what we feel, it should reflect in your debate on the floor of the House. And it should not just be that you are now trying to satisfy the political class that you belong to, and you are now pandering to the executive as a legislator. The same thing will come to
I think we need to calibrate this. So let's take each of the... We are doing a panoramic view of institutions now. Maybe let's put it that way, institutions of governance. So let's take it one after the other.
Yes, sir.
Let's take the judiciary. How will you rate judiciary in the last 22 years in terms of engagement in the overall democratic architecture?
The judiciary, when we started, we had an opportunity of retaining...
When we started in 1999.
When we started in 1999.
Yes.
We had the opportunity of retaining a disciplined judiciary. And we were fortunate that about that same time, we had a World Bank assisted legal and judicial reform system, which was to help us. And a lot of capacity building was done for both the members of the bench and their support staffing to be able to understand and operate in a democratic environment. The judiciary rose up to the occasion and were willing to entertain litigations, but suddenly the political actors flooded the judiciary with so many litigations. They were able to attend to some and take decisions and adjudicate on some of the matters in such a manner that helped our democracy to be deepened and strengthened, helped our democracy to navigate some of the issues and mitigated the electoral violences that would have occurred. All of us are familiar with 1999 to 2003, and particularly the 2003 elections, and how the judiciary ended up nullifying some of those elections and ensuring that some governors came on board midstream, and they now had a new tenure system.
So that's post 2007 actually. If you look at it, that's why we have off-cycle governorship
It started
election.
in the 2003.
Yeah, from 2003 to 2007. Yeah.
Now, when we started having that, in the midst of it, the Nigerian factor crept in, and the political actors began to influence negatively the judiciary, and we've ended up having a number of issues that studies have now shown that if you wanted a particular kind of decision from the courts, you could pay for it.
Okay, we will come back to this. Let's move to the other arm, the legislature. How will you rate the legislature? Because I want to connect the dots. Where I'm heading, if I can let you in, is that we want to do a panoramic view of each of the arm and then each of the tiers, and then see how one is influencing the other and in what direction. So let's look at the legislature. In the last 22 years, what will you say of Nigeria's legislative assembly, federal and state?
The legislature started on a very shaky note in 1999, and it has affected us till date. And you remember that between 1999 and 2003 and up to 2007, we suddenly had a high turnover of the leadership at the National Assembly. The same in quite a number of the states.
Yeah, speakers getting removed with like a noodle.
So, and that was because of the personal idiosyncratic mentality of wanting to deify a political actor, either the governor at the state level or the president. And in the midst of doing that, we started having the challenge of the discordant tunes, to the extent that not many legal procedures provided for in their own house rules were adhered to. They were able to pass a number of legislations that are done a great deal of helping to chart the way forward. Take, for instance, in the first belt, we had the opportunity of having the Independent Corrupt Practices Commission,
another related offenses
commission, and a number of those
even
issues,
EFCC,
all of it were being ruled out.
Freedom of Information Act,
all those things.
Violence Against Persons Prohibition
Unfortunately,
Act.
they were only concentrating on pushing out legislation. They are expected to participate in oversight for checks and balances on the executive. They became very lackluster and turned it into a money-making opportunities, because they just go and ask questions, and they expect the agencies that they are visiting to settle them, or when they are coming to defend their budgets before them. And a professor of political science who happened to have experienced it real, and Professor Atairu Jega, eventually disclosed this much in a paper, and nobody has been able to challenge him that it was wrong.
So that is your summary. There are three things that the legislature is supposed to do: representation, lawmaking, and oversight. You score them a bit high on legislation, that they are able to come up with laws. But on oversight, you said they turn into money making. What about representation? How do you see?
In terms
of they do have constituency offices, and then the office in their the capital. Whether
they are
Abuja
supposed to have constituency offices. Hardly do they have viable and vibrant constituency offices. And their constituency relations are very weak. The other component that we must bring to bear, and we must discuss openly, is the fact that they have turned the interface with the constituents to just be handouts and not actually receiving, because we don't need to wait for some oversight responsibilities to have been achieved on behalf of the citizenry that they represent, if they were truly interested.
There is something that happened recently. We were told that there is high turnover of unsigned bill by the National Assembly. A newspaper reported that over 200 bills that was passed by the National Assembly in the last 6 years or thereabouts were not signed by the president. What do you think account for this?
When you have political parties that are operating as a political machine for state capture only, they do not have a sink. And when you have a situation where the political actors are more interested in just saying, I sponsored this bill, because at times we don't need new legislations. What we need is to ensure that you enforce existing legislation, and where
reinforce and amend the existing.
Where there are gaps, you reinforce either through the administrative clauses that are embedded in those legislation, or amend. But what they've been doing is to rush to push some new legislation, and each of these legislation do have financial implications from the executive arm.
So the president is very cagey about signing on new commissions,
I won't say the
establishing
president, I will say the executive
the
branch,
executive. Okay.
either at the state level or the national level. Because I'm aware that what they normally do, they have this committee of the executive branch in terms of concerned stakeholders that are involved in any new legislation that will review a new legislation and try to ensure that it meets the aspirations of effective governance service delivery. But most times they do not. And it is simply because some of these political actors that are legislators are only interested. And since they have the number, all of them are thinking alike, they can rush to pass it, and the political parties are not cohesive enough and integrated that they are pursuing a unified understanding of how to truly translate the party manifesto into reality for the effective governance of the Nigerian
So
state.
let's look at the executive branch at the federal level. So what's your rating? How will you classify the executive performance in the last 22 years?
The executive branch of government started on a very good note of wanting to truly carry Nigerians along and meet the needs and aspirations of the Nigerian people. You recall that Nigeria at the turn of 1999 was a pariah nation. The then executive branch did all that needed to be done to make Nigeria welcome back to the Committee of Nations. Nigeria was taken out of gross indebtedness and we became debt-free. Nigeria now became a darling of the economic communities and economic development partners. Nigeria became a country where we were attracting foreign direct investment. Nigeria became an opportunity wherein we were able to truly and genuinely have the dynamics of those who were playing the roles that they were supposed to play. And the highlight and the icing on the cake that we had occurred when in 2007 we had an election that was most unfortunately fraught with a lot of electoral malpractice. The president that emerged, President Umar Yar'Adua, came out openly and said, "Gentlemen, Nigerian citizens, stakeholders, the election that brought me into office was fraudulent, and I needed us to understand that we cannot continue like this." And he put up the Ways Committee to address the weaknesses of our electoral system, and they came up with a far-reaching recommendations that we are trying to implement. And when we moved on, unfortunately, we ended up having a very glorious opportunity in 2015, wherein we were able to get an elected government of 2007 to 2011 and 2011 to 2015 by the ballots at an election. So the executive was able to handle that transition, and we had a smooth transition in 2015. But unfortunately, the new administration that came into in 2015 commenced and exacerbated something that had been running through all the previous administration. That is, they were undermining some provisions of the Constitution, that they will not fully comply with the provisions of some extant laws. A good example, in terms of the federal character, each administration from 1999 could be found wanting on that particular legal proviso. But unfortunately, between 2015 and date, the abuse of that federal character principle has become escalated. When you take a look at the way and manner the executive branch spends money, it is clear that not only do they spend money anyhow, they do not give us value for money. And that is why quite a number of the projects are either stalled, and the ones that were fully executed, like some of the road networks that were executed by the executive branch between 1999 and date, have not only failed, they are in a state that is unfortunate. And then the encroaching on the rights of citizens and breaching of the fundamental human rights of citizens have continued in such a manner that is unfortunate.
Let's look at the intergovernmental relationship now. In few words, how do you assess the relationship between the federal, state, and local government? Or, people have referred to governors as emperors, and that is part of the why it is very inexpeditious for more powers to be devolved to the state. I'm taking this from the agitation that there should be devolution of power. There are 68 items on the exclusive legislative list, 22 on the concurrent legislative list. Whatever is not on those two lists goes to residual. But people are saying the federal government is even pulling its weight in terms of certain norms and practices of governance. There is a semblance of governance at the federal level. But when you get to the state, it's like there is a system collapse. What's your take on this?
Painfully, you've helped to answer the question by bringing out the challenge with our constitution. We are supposed to have a federal constitution. Unfortunately, quite a number of the provisos in that constitution allude to the fact that we are operating a unitary system. And that is why the exclusive list is overburdened. And I'm hoping that the current constitutional review will help us to address some of those gaps and lapses. The moment you have a unitary system at the national level, it will cascade to the sub-national units. The sub-national units are made to believe that they must come to see the almighty emperor in Abuja. They must receive some handouts from him. By the time they are receiving those handouts, they must satisfy some political elite actors, their godfathers. So by the time they get back to the state level, they have minimal resources that they can truly utilize. And mind you, when we are looking at the relationship between the states and the federal, in the last couple of years, we have discovered that we've had some crisis. One, where the federal wants to emasculate and strangulate the state. There was a classical one under the Obasanjo administration where the resources and allocation to Lagos State were denied for months. Yes, Lagos was able to become innovative and do internally generated revenue that sustained them during that period. Yes, we had not only such a thing, we had this unfortunate trend of political actors and their state legislators elected on a particular political platform, crossing en masse into the party at the center.
At the center.
Which ultimately just makes it impossible for them to deliver. The next thing is the relationship with the...
Excuse me. I hope you are not making excuses for the governors.
I'm not making excuses.
I'm saying that against the backdrop of, we have seen what the governors have done with their own powers. Now, judicial workers are on strike. The assembly workers, state assembly workers are on strike for months now, arising from the inability of the governors to reach a consensus to implement Section 121 sub 3 of the Constitution that was amended in 2018 that granted financial autonomy to state assembly and state judiciary. Will you still blame that on the federal government? We have seen situations where the local government autonomy is being utterly resisted by the governors. Are we still going to blame that on the federal government?
I don't see governors as being separate from political actors. It is unfortunate that these political actors are only concerned about state capture.
You said that earlier.
Once they are doing only state capture, they are not going to follow the rules. And that is why ab initio, what they do, they only want yes men as legislators. For example, when you look at the legislative executive relationships, either at the state level, and let us concentrate at the state level, the legislature at the state level is just a rubber stamp. They call them to government house. This is what we want to do. If you raise an objection, if you are not careful, if you are a speaker, by the following morning, if you raise the objection last night, by today, this morning, you will see the signposts at the assembly and you are gone. So they always end up playing along. The same thing is happening at the national level. But the one of the states to the local government is of our concern now.
Exactly.
Because that is where some of these abuses magnify the dysfunctionality of the Nigerian state.
In fact, that's where everybody resides. Sir, even the president is in a local government. He resides in a local government. Every one of us come from a state. Federal is an abstraction. It's an abstract. Where is federal government? Federal government is not Abuja. People have that misconception that federal government is Abuja. Abuja is just the seat of federal government. But who can say I come from federal government? But you can say you are from Ekiti State. I can say I'm from Oyo State, or any other person can point to his community in a local government and in a state. So why do we have this manifest abuse, gross abuse of power, executive recklessness, legislative, brigandage and ineptitude at the state and local government level? I think that is what I want you to beam your satellite on.
Because the theme of our discussion is a panacea.
Yes, we're coming. We just explain.
We need to now begin to enlighten ourselves and the citizenry on the contents and provisions of our constitution and legal and policy frameworks.
Exactly.
So that when those who capture the states are not operating as expected by the provisions of the office they now occupy, we can hold them accountable. One of which is, if you're a legislator and you are not doing the correct thing, we can recall you back. Even though the political motivation led to the recall attempt of Dino Melaye, it was a welcome development for people like us in the sense that it allowed us to test that particular provision of the law and that we can activate it subsequently. Because if you've had a precedent that it was utilized before, then we can attempt to utilize it again. The next thing that I will want to emphasize is that the political education and political socialization must now move not only from the citizens. We need to strengthen the political parties. You will recall that we participated in 1999, 2003, 2007 building the capacity of the political parties.
Exactly. Even up to now, their capacities are being built. There is a need. There's a political party leadership development training center at the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Study, Kuru. International Republican Institutes have done a lot of capacity building for political parties. So what is the problem? We can talk of when they were 91. Now they are 18. Have we seen any difference between 18 and 91?
The truth of it is that the seriousness that people approach those capacity building, particularly in 99 and 2003 up to 2007, is not what they are deploying now. People are only interested in taking advantage of being available at those trainings, and once they've done the training, they forget what they learned, and they are only interested in using the position that they now occupy to enrich themselves and to demand for the perks that are associated.
It will seem, Mr. Fagbemi, that you hold the political elite culpable of a governance challenge. What about the civil servants? People have said that, look, if the political leadership is the head, the civil service or the civil servants are the neck, and there is no political leadership or leader can defraud or commit atrocity without being aided and abetted by the civil servants. What is your take about the Nigerian civil service? Federal, state, local. How will you view them in 22 years?
In the last 22 years, what has happened, for any good student, you'll discover that a number of the people that emerged as political actors moved from public services into the space of becoming political actors seeking leadership roles through the electoral processes and democratic principles. And a number of them had known how to circumvent some of the provisions. And when they are now in the leadership roles, they are able to say, all you need to do is do this way. And even the incumbent public servants, because of the unfortunate corruption often associated with their disengagement benefits when they retire, they want to have accumulated enough before they leave office. In the midst of doing that, they are again partnering with these political actors. And you'll discover that they now help to amplify the desire of the political actors that are now fully away from civil service, but are now in public service, to rape the Nigerian state and the people of the resources they are supposed to use. Meaning, therefore, that what they do is circumvent the provisions. When you take a case of the malfeasance associated with financial mismanagement, it is clear that the financial rules and regulations of public service have been breached severally. And you will now discover that only the political actors are highlighted. The civil servants
who provided the technical support often not get. Okay, as we come into making recommendations for how to overcome this governance challenge, let me bring our viewers in. You can join this discussion by dialing their studio number 0809 989 1989. It's there on your screen. 0809 987 1989. It's there. Just dial And your comments, questions, we can take a couple of them before we round up on this segment of this discussion. So, while we await our callers, solutions. So, we have identified, we have extracted from the three arms of government to the three tiers of government to the political parties to the civil servants or civil service. How do we overcome this lingering governance challenge in Nigeria?
All of us must take pains to knowing the contents and provisions of existing laws. 2, all of us must come to terms with the reality that there is a need for constructive engagement. All of us must now know that constructive engagement and criticisms are expected to provide us the required opportunities with which we can truly and genuinely handle issues, and that when people are communicating, it's a two-way interaction through which you can receive and verify and validate the information to be able to moderate your own already held position so that you can now improve. The developments and integrated development and the national growth and development, it appears as if I'm repeating myself, but it is deliberate. When you are interested in developing the society, you want the humans in that society to be developed. You want the environment developed in such a way that ultimately everybody will be mutually benefiting. All the governance services must be focused on this. Then we must know that our security and law enforcement systems are expected to strictly utilize the laws and enforce those laws and use the laws to apprehend those who have done one thing or the other wrong, so that it will not be a free-for-all, and people will know that if anything is done wrongly, people can easily be apprehended and brought to book. And finally, in terms of the immediate things that our citizens are associated, we expect the religious leaders, we expect the community and opinion leaders, including the traditional institutions, to begin to take more responsibilities and harnessing the resources. And then we now move to the next level, that at that opportune time when we have elected officials, appointed officials, we should not just be expecting handouts from them. We should bring them to the level that they are rendering services, they are willing to give stewardship accountability, so that we can engage them and move in the right direction.
So now, in the last couple of weeks, the National Assembly has conducted a couple of public hearings to review the Constitution. The Senate had its own 26, 27 of May, and then on the 1st and 2nd of June, which is the month we are here now, the House of Reps also took their own public hearing on constitutional reform or review to the states. So, in your own view, how adequate or inadequate is this? People have said we need a brand new constitution, rather than just thinking this will be the 5th alteration if we succeeded. So, what's your take? Is it a step in the right direction that the National Assembly has taken on reviewing the constitution?
Within the context of that available to us on the legal policy framework that we are operating, the 1999 Constitution, the best that can be achieved is to amend and alter the Constitution.
Okay.
However, the responsiveness of the National Assembly must be mindful of the fact that the agitations, security breaches, and the concerns, the existential concerns of the Nigerian state are indicative of two major options. Option one is totally jettisoning
the 1999 Constitution. The option 2 is for you to provide for the ascension of the last known properly negotiated constitution, the 1963 Constitution. However, within the provisions of the existing constitution, we can only move in the right direction by the time we succeed in amending particularly section 2 of the constitution, which is talking about the Nigerian state's existence and the nature and character that you are going to have. The section 2 is very instructive to note that it says Nigeria shall be known as a federal republic. It does not say that Nigeria shall be and function. So if I choose to come into this studio to be known as Jide Ojo Ayokunle, that is what I've chosen to be known as. It does not mean that I'm Jide Ojo Ayokunle, but I've assumed that nomenclature.
Okay.
Section 9 too will need to change. So
I hope you have the opportunity to present a memo when the National Assembly decides to have the Abuja public hearing. But on a last note, okay, you did. Okay, you sent in your memo. That's fine. Lastly, as we wind up, you are a peace builder, and we have a challenging security situation on our hands. Your thoughts, closing thoughts on how we can resolve this intractable security challenge that is almost swallowing up the country.
It's very simple to resolve. Once you approach it correctly and label it correctly. Take, for instance, you often hear nomadic have farmer-herders clashes to explain the nomadic herdsmen security challenges and breaches. To me, there is nothing known to our laws that is called farmer-herders clash. Because you need to now ask the question, what are the variables that describe the farmer-herders clash? Somebody carries some cattle to enter somebody's farmland. In law, that is called trespass. In law, it is called encroachment. When you destroy, you are now moving to the level of arson. When you look at the nomadic herdsmen-related security challenges, when you look at the penal code, you have 58 provisions of the penal code that all the descriptions that are being used by the executive branch of the Nigerian state to explain to us, 58 clauses have been breached in the penal code. And the Nigerian police, the SSS, are not using those provisions. When you move to the level of the criminal code, you have 78 clauses.
So in summary, because our time is up.
Until we are going to, if we really want to solve the problem of security breaches, we must label them correctly. We must now enforce the laws so that we can truly profile the issues and apprehend and prosecute these individuals. The moment you are able to prosecute 1 or 2, 3, 4 individuals, there will be deterrence. If there is no deterrence, the cycle will continue. And if you keep on using wrong labeling, we will keep on having this continue. When people are killed, it is called homicide, killing, murder. You now have to conduct homicidal investigation. When people get killed, you are supposed to activate the coroner's law and use the coroner's law to ensure that you can, from the body, go back to identifying how the crime was committed. But currently, you'll discover that when people are killed in a theater, The thing that they rush to do is to do mass burial. We must begin to stop that. State governors in particular must now begin to activate their coroner's law to make sure that we properly document all these things and then demand for back-end investigation.
Anyway, viewers, that would be the size of our discussion on this first segment of Development Focus with Jide Ojo on ITV. My enormous thanks to Dr. Ayokunle Fagbemi, who has, 1 hour is just not enough to exhaust discussing issues of governance in Nigeria. I took you down to your forte, which is the peace building and security, and we just don't have sufficient time. But not to worry, I believe in due course, when we do call you, you will oblige us. So we'll take a short break now, and then we'll come back for another segment, the concluding segment of Development Focus with Jide Ojo on ITV this morning. Please do stay tuned.